All right, let's jump right into this explainer. If you're a highly analytical thinker, you probably look at human social dynamics and see a chaotic, totally irrational mess. It's like a giant puzzle with missing pieces, right? But what if we could reframe that messy landscape of human interaction into a highly predictable, perfectly logical framework? Well, today, we're doing exactly that. We're going to construct a complete blueprint for what we call social intelligence mapping.
Here is our game plan to engineer that social environment. We're going to deconstruct social intelligence into 5 specific technical modules. First, the trust intelligence paradox. Second, evolutionary vocal grooming. Third, the physics behind the propinquity effect. Number 4, Socratic dialectics. And finally, we'll install the 5-second buffer.
Diving right into Module 1, the trust intelligence paradox, let's explore why highly analytical minds tend to view soft skills as irrational or even totally unnecessary.
Have you ever wondered why some of the absolute smartest people you know struggle so much with basic social trust? We usually just write it off, right? Like, oh, it's just a personality quirk. But actually, it goes way deeper than that. It traces right back to an evolutionary adaptation to our early life environments. To understand why brilliant people struggle to connect, we really have to look at the data on how trust is formed in the first place.
Look at how the data splits here. It's incredibly fascinating. If you grew up in a stable, advantaged environment, having higher cognitive ability strongly correlates with greater trust. Why? Because in that world, trust is a winning, socially rewarded strategy. But if you came from a disadvantaged or unstable background, your intelligence gets deployed completely differently. It literally becomes a radar for hypervigilance and skepticism. So, for highly analytical folks from unstable backgrounds, lacking social trust isn't some broken social defect. Honestly, it's a perfectly logical survival mechanism.
Moving right along to Module 2, evolutionary cohesion, or as I like to call it, vocal grooming. Now we're shifting from internal trust to how we handle the wider group. Let's talk about small talk.
To really understand small talk, we have to look at Dunbar's number. In the primate world, how do monkeys keep the peace? They physically groom each other, picking bugs out of fur. It literally cements their friendships. But as human brains got bigger, our tribes expanded to about 150 members. If we stuck to physical grooming at that size, it would be temporally impossible. We'd literally spend half our day doing it. We absolutely needed a new, mathematical approach to survival.
Evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar actually calculated our social bandwidth, and it breaks down into these super precise layers. You have a tight-knit support clique of 5, a sympathy group of 15, an affinity group of 50, all capping out at that famous 150 mark. Maintaining all those different layers across so many individuals, you can't just physically groom 150 people. You need a massively efficient tool to pull it off. And that is where language enters the chat. Small talk is our evolutionary hack. It's a ridiculously cheap, ultra-efficient form of vocal grooming. Think about it. You can essentially groom 3 or 4 allies at the exact same time, and your hands are still free to actually work. So the next time you're dreading office chit-chat, remember that small talk isn't an annoying waste of time. It's a biological imperative. It signals cooperative intent and literally prevents the total collapse of the group.
Okay, let's hit Module 3, the propinquity effect in leadership. We've mapped out the evolutionary need for connection, so let's look at the actual spatial physics of how these bonds form in the real world. This brings us to propinquity. It's just a $10 word for physical nearness. You know, leadership isn't always about abstract charisma or giving movie speech monologues. A huge chunk of it is heavily dictated by the raw mathematical probability of spatial nearness, or functional distance. It's entirely about how likely you are to simply cross paths with someone else in your environment.
Get this. The data is absolutely striking. Simply sitting adjacent to someone bumps up the chance of you two becoming mutual friends by 46% compared to sitting further away, almost 50%. And this is entirely driven by the economy of action. Our brains are naturally efficient or lazy depending on how you look at it, so they form positive bonds with whoever takes the least physical effort to interact with. And this spatial logic scales directly to the modern workplace. An MIT study found that the second you remove physical proximity, like sticking teams in separate buildings or going completely remote, the spontaneous magic that drives professional collaboration just decays immediately. Now, leaders are in a bit of a paradox here. Keeping your distance can create this cool, heroic aura that masks your mundane flaws. But if you actually want to influence a team, you have to engineer functional proximity. You literally have to put yourself in the physical path of your team. All right, zooming in from Module 4, the Socratic method for deep rapport.
How do you actually engineer trust when you go from the macro office floor plan to a micro one-on-one conversation?
For the highly analytical brain, there's a Socratic method called meutics that works like an absolute charm. It provides a perfect logical algorithm for building deep rapport. See, Socrates didn't view himself as a teacher. Instead, he saw himself as a midwife, simply helping other people give birth to their own knowledge and uncover the truth themselves.
Think of this Socratic inquiry loop as a strict 4-step algorithm. Step 1, understand their belief. Step 2, sum up their argument. This proves you actually listened. Step 3, ask them for evidence. And Step 4, gently challenge their assumptions. By running this exact script, you totally transform the dynamic. You shift from being the sage on the stage, trying to aggressively win a debate, to the guide on the side, ensuring the conversation becomes an objective, shared search for the truth. The ultimate goal of all this is creating what we call productive discomfort. You do this by maintaining absolute strict neutrality. You never, ever suggest that you have the correct answer. Why? Because this neutral cross-examination safely dismantles their cognitive distortions without tripping any defensive emotional alarm bells. They don't get defensive because, hey, you're just asking questions.
And finally, Module 5, the 5-second cognitive buffer. Let's look at the neurobiological defense system you need to actually execute all of these tactics when the pressure is on. So imagine you're in a heated argument. Boom, emotional trigger at 0 seconds. By 1 millisecond, your amygdala, your lower brain, literally floors the gas pedal, and rationality just goes entirely offline. But if you intentionally install a temporal speed bump, just a tiny pause of 1 to 4 seconds, you give your prefrontal cortex, the CEO of your brain, enough time to slam on the brakes right at the 5-second mark.
5 seconds is literally the magic number here. Researchers at the University of St. Andrews prove that pausing for just 5 seconds works exactly as well as pausing for 15 seconds when it comes to dropping aggression levels. You don't need to leave the room and take a long walk around the block to cool off. You just need to break the physiological momentum of that initial trigger.
So what do you actually do during those 5 seconds? You use a trick called cognitive labeling. While you pause, you mentally label the emotion. You tell yourself, okay, I am feeling incredibly defensive right now. Psychologists call this name it to tame it. By doing this, you forcefully drag the processing out of your reactive amygdala and throw it into your logical prefrontal cortex. You are turning a blind reactive urge into a cold, deliberate choice.
Okay, let's tie this entire systems architecture blueprint together. Stop looking at social interactions as some mystical, magical charisma. View them as predictable inputs and outputs, and you reclaim total proactive control. You intentionally map your environment for propinquity, so you're in the path of collaboration. You execute vocal grooming because you know the biology behind group cohesion. You run the Socratic algorithm to build rapport safely, and you engage that 5-second cognitive buffer to ensure your logic always overrides your impulses.
Once you look at human dynamics through this lens, evolution, spatial physics, and neurology, all that messy chaos just fades away. It becomes a system you can absolutely master. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. What if the most complex mathematical equation you will ever solve is simply the human being sitting across from you? Are you ready to engineer your next social interaction?